Is there a second? There is. Clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Baldwin. Mr. Barrasso. Mr. Bennett. Mrs. Blackburn. Mr. Blumenthal. Mr. Blunt. Mr. Booker. Mr. Bozeman. Mr. Braun. Mr. Brown. Mr. Burr. Miss Cantwell. Mrs. Capito. Mr. Carden. Mr. Carper. Mr. Casey. Mr. Cassidy. Ms. Collins. Mr. Coons. Mr. Cornyn. Ms. Cortez Masto. Mr. Cotton. Mr. Kramer. Mr. Crapo. Mr. Cruz. Mr. Daines. Ms. Duckworth. Mr. Durbin. Ms. Ernst. Mrs. Feinstein. Mrs. Fisher. Mrs. Gillibrand. Mr. Graham. Mr. Grassley. Mr. Haggerty. Ms. Harris. Ms. Hassan. Mr. Holy. Mr. Heinrich. Mr. Hickenlooper. Ms. Hirono. No. Mr. Hoban. Mrs. Hyde-Smith. Mr. Inhofe. Mr. Johnson. Mr. Kane. Mr. Kelly. Mr. Kennedy. Mr. King. Ms. Klobuchar. Mr. Langford. Mr. Leahy. Mr. Lee. Mrs. Leffler. Mr. Lujan. Ms. Lummis. Mr. Manchin. Mr. Murphy. Mr. Marshall. Mr. McConnell. Mr. Menendez. Mr. Merkley. Mr. Moran. Ms. Murkowski. Mr. Murphy. Mrs. Murray. Mr. Paul. Mr. Peters. Mr. Portman. Mr. Reed. Mr. Risch. Mr. Romney. Ms. Rosen. Mr. Rounds, Mr. Rubio, Mr. Sanders, Mr. Sass, Mr. Schatz, Mr. Schumer, Mr. Scott of Florida, Mr. Scott of South Carolina, Mrs. Shaheen, Mr. Shelby, Ms. Cinema, Ms. Smith, Ms. Stabenow, Mr. Sullivan, Mr. Tester, Mr. Thune, Mr. Tillis, Mr. Toomey, Mr. Tuberville, Mr. Van Hollen, Mr. Warner, Ms. Warren, Mr. Whitehouse, Mr. Wicker, Mr. Wyden, Mr. Young,
6. The nays are 93. The objection is not sustained. The Secretary will notify the House of the action of the Senate, informing that body that the Senate is now ready to proceed to joint session with further counting of the electoral vote for President and Vice President.
Yea 6, nay 93.
So, colleagues, here's where we are. We have a few more speakers now as we wait for the House to finish their debate and vote. We expect the House to finish voting on Arizona between 11:30 and midnight. I ask unanimous consent the Senate be in a period of morning business with the following senators permitted to speak therein for up to 5 minutes each: Senator Toomey, Senator Rubio, Senator Collins.
And on our side, Senators Wyden, Hirono, and Coons.
Finally, following their remarks, the Senate stand in recess subject to the call of the chair.
No.
My glasses on.
The
Is that
censored
Rubio? It
stories that
sounds
might have
like
been negative
Yeah,
towards Joe
Rubio.
Biden or were negative towards Joe Biden. The social media companies helped him out. And they saw how some states tinkered with and even mutilated state election laws, and they have doubts that the election was legitimate. And it gives this country this extraordinary crisis of confidence, which is very dangerous because democracy is very fragile and it's not held together by elections. Democracy is held together by people's confidence in the election and their willingness to abide by its results. And so the notion was, we need to do something, we need to fight. And several of my colleagues have adopted the idea, and I respect it, that they're going to object. Now listen, it's important to understand something. Even the people objecting in the Senate recognize that it's not going to pass. It's not going to change the outcome, but it's going to send a message. And it's going to make a point. The problem is, I think it's a terrible idea at this moment. Just hours ago, a young lady died in this Capitol. That means somebody somewhere in this country got a phone call that their daughter was dead. Daughter was going to a political rally, she is dead. Died in this Capitol, somewhere not far from where we are standing. We have police officers, the men and women that we walk by every single day that guard the doors and we say hello to, out there with riot gear, getting spit on and attacked. Today, not 10 weeks ago, just a few hours ago. And I think it's important to think about all those things on a night like tonight and everything that's happening. You know, I wouldn't even be here today. I doubt very much where I would even have been interested in politics had it not been for my grandfather. He died when I was 14, but I grew up at his knee. He would sit on the porch, he would smoke 3 cigars a day, and he loved history. He was born in 1899 in rural Cuba. It was still governed by the United States. It was a protectorate. 3 years later, it gained its independence and became a republic. During my grandfather's first 60 years of life, he saw his country have an armed insurrection after a contested election, multiple presidents go into exile, 2 military coups, and the rise of a Marxist dictator. A tyranny that stands to this day. My entire life, I have lived with and next to people who came to America because their country was chaotic and their country was unsafe. What I saw today, what we have seen, looks more like those countries than the extraordinary nation that I am privileged to call home. And I think about the mockery that it makes of our country. A lot of people, oh, well, China. No, let me just say something in all modesty. No one here has worked harder on the issue of China. They hate my guts. I'm sanctioned, twice sanctioned. I don't know what they're sanctioning. Double sanctioned, and I can't travel there. I wasn't planning to anyway. China's laughing. They're loving this tonight. In Beijing, they're high-fiving because they point to this and say, this is proof the future belongs to China, America's in decline. Vladimir Putin, there's nothing Vladimir Putin could have come up with better than what happened here. Makes us look like we're in total chaos and collapse. Not to mention the Ayatollah, who's probably bragging, if he has buddies, to his buddies, look what's happening to the great Satan. I think politics has made us crazy. Everybody in this country has lost their minds on politics. And we have forgotten that America is not a government. America is not a president. America's not a Congress. Let me tell you what America is. America's your family. America's your faith. America's your community. That's America. That's what our adversaries don't understand, and that's what we need to remember. That is how we're going to rebuild this country and turn the page and have a future even brighter than our past. And so that's why I feel so strongly about this, and why I hope those who disagree with me will understand. I yield the floor.
Of our nation. Not fear, not force, but the peaceful expression of the popular will. Now, we assembled this afternoon to count our citizens' votes and to formalize their choice of the next president. Now we're going to finish exactly what we started. We'll complete the process the right way, by the book. We'll follow our precedents, our laws, and our Constitution to the letter. And we will certify the winner of the 2020 presidential election. Criminal behavior will never dominate the United States Congress. This institution is resilient. Our democratic republic is strong. The American people deserve nothing less.
Democratic leader.
Mr. President. Mr. President, it is very, very difficult to put into words what has transpired today. I have never lived through or even imagined an experience like the one we have just witnessed in this Capitol. President Franklin Roosevelt set aside December 7, 1941 as a day that will live in infamy. Unfortunately, we can now add January 6, 2021 to that very short list of dates in American history that will live forever in infamy. This temple to democracy was desecrated. Its windows smashed, our offices vandalized. The world saw Americans' elected officials hurriedly ushered out because they were in harm's way. The House and Senate floors were places of shelter until the evacuation was ordered, leaving rioters to stalk these hallowed halls. Lawmakers and our staffs, average citizens who love their country, serve it every day, feared for their lives. I understand that one woman was shot and tragically lost her life. We mourn her and feel for her friends and family. These images were projected to the world. Foreign embassies cabled home their home capitals to report the harrowing scenes at the very heart of our democracy. This will be a stain on our country, not so easily washed away. The final, terrible, indelible legacy of the 45th President of the United States, undoubtedly our worst. I want to be very clear. Those who perform these reprehensible acts cannot be called protesters. No, these were rioters and insurrectionists, goons and thugs, domestic terrorists. They do not represent America. They were a few thousand violent extremists who tried to take over the Capitol building and attack our democracy. They must and should be prosecuted to the full extent of the law, hopefully by this administration, if not, certainly by the next. They should be provided no leniency. I want to thank the many of the Capitol Hill Police and Secret Service and local police who kept us safe today and worked to clear the Capitol and return it to its rightful owners and its rightful purpose. I want to thank the leaders, Democrat and Republican, House and Senate. It was Speaker Pelosi, Leader McConnell, Leader McCarthy, and myself who came together and decided that these thugs would not succeed, that we would finish the work of that our Constitution requires us to complete in the very legislative chambers of the House and Senate that were desecrated, but we know always belong to the people and do again tonight. But make no mistake, my friends, today's events did not happen spontaneously. The president who promoted conspiracy theories that motivated these thugs, the president who exhorted them to come to our nation's capital, egged them on. He hardly ever discourages violence and more often encourages it. This president bears a great deal of the blame. This mob was in good part President Trump's doing, incited by his words, his lies. This violence, in good part, his responsibility, his everlasting shame. Today's events certainly would not have happened without him. Now, January 6th will go down as one of the darkest days in recent American history. A final warning to our nation about the consequences of a demagogic president, the people who enable him, the captive media that parrots his lies, and the people who follow him as he attempts to push America to the brink of ruin. As we reconvene tonight, let us remember, in the end, all this mob has really accomplished is to delay our work by a few hours. We will resume our responsibilities now, and we will finish our task tonight. The House and Senate chambers will be restored good as new and ready for legislating in short order. The counting of the electoral votes is our sacred duty. Democracy's roots in this nation are deep, they're strong, and they will not be undone, ever, by a group of thugs. Democracy will triumph, as it has for centuries. So to my fellow Americans who were shocked and appalled by the images on their televisions today, and who are worried about the future of this country, let me speak to you directly. The divisions in our country clearly run deep, but we are a resilient, forward-looking, and optimistic people, and we will begin the hard work of repairing this nation tonight, because here in America, we do hard things. In America, we always overcome our challenges. Yield the floor.
Next, the opening of Wednesday's debate on the...
A senator may speak to the objection for 5 minutes and not more than once. Debate shall not exceed 2 hours, after which the chair will put the question, shall the objection be sustained? The clerk will report the objection made in the joint session.